So on October the 1st, Jude Bellingham was named England's Player of the Year. 48 hours later, he was left out of the England squad. Yeah. James, you're obviously our England man. Can you kind of explain where we are with Jude Bellingham, Thomas Tuchel, England and the World Cup?
So he obviously had shoulder surgery, which ruled him out of the start of the season for Real Madrid. He was left out in September for that reason. But everybody thought he was going to come back for the October squad because he had returned to playing for Real Madrid, but he had not completed 90 minutes. I think he played 4 times, started once for Real. But Thomas Tuchel, someone who's repeatedly stressed, I don't have a lot of time with the players. There's only a handful of camps. He's sort of talking in days that he has to work with this group before trying to win the World Cup next summer. So you'd think someone as integral, or apparently integral, as Jude Bellingham would be welcomed with open arms as soon as he was able to walk again. But he's made a point of leaving him out. And I think it's sent a real message, not just to Jude Bellingham, but obviously he also left out Phil Foden, he left out Jack Grealish. And I think he's trying to say to the group, look, you have to earn the right to be here, and you also have to be somebody who is committed to the cause and will fall in line during the camps. And if you don't do that, you will not be selected. And I think, look, it would be a huge call to leave him out of the World Cup entirely. And I think actually Tuchel's done this at the right kind of time, because he can do it under the cloak of, well, he's only just come back from injury. But also privately, he can get the message across that I think he wants to get across, and still give Jude Bellingham plenty of time to, regain his form, regain his fitness, and be part of the squad next summer.
So, is this a football decision, or is there more to it? Because we've all heard the noises around Bellingham in the squad, Bellingham's dad. It doesn't go away, does it? So, is it all about football, or is there a little bit of a message to the Bellinghams, Jude in particular, that you've got to not just raise your game on the pitch, but you've got to change your game off it?
Yeah. This is a difficult topic, because I think it strays into the area where I think fans sometimes think, because we can't be specific and we can't point to sort of documented examples, that it lends itself to the idea that we have some sort of agenda, which is it's not the case. It's a case of there have been rumours around Jude Bellingham's behaviour and his attitude in the camp dating back to certainly before the Euros last summer. So obviously a long time before Thomas Tuchel took over. And I think it was Gareth Southgate's way of handling it was to put him in the leadership group, which was quite a bold decision at the time, because that group comprised many more sort of senior older players, Harry Kane, Kieran Trippier in there. Was it Declan Rice, I think, was in there as well. And suddenly you had a sort of 21, 22-year-old. Obviously he's played a lot of football at club level, and he's played quite a few times for England, but he wasn't sort of an experienced tournament performer. He wasn't sort of, from what I was told around the camp, he wasn't a sort of guy everyone would go to for advice, or would be seen as a particularly sort of, leadership material. And I think Southgate tried to handle it that way. And we all saw, in fact, Mark, I always remember, because we sat next to each other at the final, and you saw it, didn't you, live?
When he ranted at Southgate.
When and obviously we'll never know exactly what was said, but England were losing at that point, and Jude Bellingham was sort of openly, how would you describe it, hostile towards his manager.
It was angry. It was talking to Southgate like it was the roles had been reversed. It was like Bellingham was the manager and Southgate was an underperforming player on the pitch. It was just, I thought it was kind of, listen, with Bellingham, there's 2 sides to the coin and everything. He rates himself, but he should do. He plays for Real Madrid. But equally, I think you're right in saying the leadership group was elevated too high and too quickly for that. And I think it just got to his head that I don't like having a go at players for having a character and having the personality, but at that age, at that level, I don't think he should be digging out his manager in a Euros final the way he did. It was really disrespectful, I thought. It was disrespectful in the manner that he did it. Then he was kicking, drink bottles over. He comes across as being quite petulant. And I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? That it's you mentioned his behaviour. We've got to be careful with words. I suppose behaviour is probably too strong, because I don't think there's been any kind of discipline incidents, but it's more like his conduct, isn't it? It's just his kind of demeanour around the squad that ruffles people's feathers. And as we know, and again, this is almost like a boohoo media complaining, but all the players have an agreement to share the media load. They all do it. A lot of them do it, quite happily. Harry Kane does an awful lot of media. Declan Rice does an awful lot of media with England. Jude Bellingham doesn't. He'll do the television stuff because I think he likes being on TV, but he doesn't do the written media, which I've been told it's got to some of the senior players are not happy that he's not doing it.
And that is the really important point whenever this gets brought up, because I see this when journalists talk about this, I see a lot of fans react to say, "Oh, well, you're just giving Jude Bellingham stick because he doesn't talk to you." That is not what this is. It's his decision to not pull his weight in that regard has an impact on the other players in the squad. I know for a fact you're right, there are senior players who sort of said, well, hang on a minute, because not a lot of them like talking to us. Mm-hmm. Some of them do, some of them don't. And particularly in camp when it's very intense and they've got to speak to somebody every day on rotation, whether that's the newspapers, the TV, the radio, or their own in-house stuff, and obviously social media now bigger than ever. There's obligations on all of them, whether they're playing, whether they're not. And when you've got a player who purports to be one of the main men, he holds himself up to that regard. And when he doesn't take his share of the load, there are other players in the squad who go, well, hang on a minute, why is it one rule for him and one?
And then he comes out and says he's a scapegoat after the tournament. There's these little things I'll add up on. This is what I'm asking about Tuchel. I think it's just a gradual accumulation of all these little things. It's just, right, this has got to stop now. You are injured. It's a good time to do it, like you say. You can't really complain about lack of action. So
let me ask you both then, that with international football, are you in the camp that you always have to pick your best players for tournaments because they are your best players? Or do you take a more rounded view that you get a limited time to have the players on the training pitch, you get a limited time in camp, and it's not necessarily about picking your best players, even if it's someone like Jude Bellingham who's at Real Madrid, and it's more important to pick a squad or a team that is easier to gel together?
Well, yeah. So my thinking on this, I think, has probably changed over time. I think I've subscribed to the view now that you have to run it like a club team.
Yeah.
And Tuchel's actually talked quite a lot about that during this international break, and I think he's also been influenced by talking to people at the FA. I think he sounded out a lot of people in sort of under Southgate and in the old group about what went right and what went wrong, and he's constantly talking about team spirit and the culture within the group. And we all know, without getting into another debate about Gareth Southgate, that was his biggest gift really to England, was reconnecting the team with the fans and the team with each other really, and making them want to play for England again. And I think Tuchel's so wary of protecting that I think if he sees any attitudes, any egos, any compromises in the sort of collective and team cohesion, then he's going to leave those big players out. And I have to say, I kind of agree with it, because I think otherwise, what do you stand for? Otherwise, you're just a manager coming in, and how do you say to the group who beat Serbia 5-0 in Belgrade last month, that was the best performance I've seen since I've taken charge, this has been the best camp, and then drop 4 or 5 of them to bring in players who have either not played or, as I say, maybe there have been little things he's seen that he's not entirely convinced are going to add positivity to the group.
I mean, this is the Sir Alex Ferguson rule, isn't it? If somebody's either too big for his boots or becoming a problem, you get rid. I mean, Roy Keane was bombed. Jaap Stam probably wrongly was got rid of David Beckham. So I think there are examples of clubs and teams that have done better by removing the difficult personality. But you see, the situation Bellingham is, there's no way that Thomas Tuchel isn't taking it to the World Cup, because that's his one shot at the World Cup, Thomas Tuchel. So he's not going to go to the World Cup and not take a guy who plays for Real Madrid. Even if, I might be wrong here, but I think his reputation is a bit inflated, 6 goals in 44 internationals. He's not as important to Real Madrid as Harry Kane is to Bayern Munich. I think, let's be honest, Jude Bellingham was a good player, but he's suddenly been elevated to Ballon d'Or winner. He's not that. His England record is good. He gets the goal against in a game when England needed somebody to deliver a late goal, but I don't know what he actually does. He's not a defensive midfielder. He roams around too much to be an attacking midfielder. It doesn't do his defensive side of the job. So it's tricky. But then,
let me ask you then, if you're both saying there's no scenario that Jude Bellingham and/or Phil Foden get left out of that England squad for the World Cup if they're both fit, then what's the point of all this? What's the point of Thomas Tuchel trying to send a message to something that eventually is going to kind of...
Because it's not just about Jude, it's about what you're saying to the group and what you're trying to grow. There was a real sense in camp last month that it was the start of something. He's a lot of his internal messaging has been the World Cup starts now. The competition is on for places, but the World Cup starts now, and you've got to be showing the right mentality and training every day, that kind of thing. From what are we, 7-8 months out? because that's the way you win the tournament. Now, it undermines everything that you're trying to build. If the team goes and wins, and I know people can maybe debate the merits of that result, but I went to Belgrade. That was a difficult place. It's always a tough place. That's a tough place to go. But I mean, it's a hostile atmosphere. They had a very good home record, Serbia. Two very good players up front in Vlahovic and Mitrovic, although Mitrovic didn't start. That was a tough test, and England battered them. That was a really good performance, and he will feel totally vindicated, by the way, in all of this, by the way they played against Wales in the first half, because that was one of the most sort of fluid attacking performances. And again, it was Wales that didn't turn up. Their own manager sort of said that it was nowhere near their own level. Craig Bellamy was very disappointed with them. But I don't see how you can, how many times have we sat here in the past and looked at England managers who've just picked players on reputation?
Well, I don't think they should. I don't think that Bellingham should be guaranteed a place at the World Cup squad.
I don't think he is, but I just think what football people are like, that it's Tuchel's insurance policy to pick him rather than not, isn't it? Can you imagine if they don't pick Jude Bellingham and England gets to the quarterfinals? It's like, you should have picked Jude Bellingham.
But if you were Thomas Tuchel and you were looking at what you've achieved in Serbia, for example, or what you did against Wales, and you feel like you're growing something, and maybe in Thomas Tuchel's head, he's starting to think, well, there is a possibility that Jude Bellingham doesn't start the first game of a World Cup. If I was Thomas Tuchel, I would probably be thinking I'd probably much rather just leave him at home than have that kind of noise around not starting him.
The problem is, though, I see what you're saying, but Wales, Latvia, Tuesday night, Serbia, they were a good side at home, but I mean, these teams are nowhere near the level of quality that you're going to face in the World Cup if you're going to win it. You can't judge Morgan Rodgers on playing against Wales and Latvia, unfortunately, because, and this is Tuchel's problem, isn't it, is in this period of time now where nothing really matters. It is kind of pointless, because until you kind of face a proper team, a France, a Brazil, Spain, you don't really know if Morgan Rodgers can do it, but you do know that Jude Bellingham can certainly perform at that high level, even if, like I say, his reputation is a bit overblown.
And the other thing I think we should say about Jude is that he has that kind of arrogance about him, but you need that.
Yeah,
swagger.
totally, absolutely.
We want England players. We talked for years about England players who've kind of shoulders have been sort of dropped under the weight of the shirt, and they've not been able to sort of realise their potential. This is a guy who embraces it. He wants the big stage. He wants the responsibility, and he wants to go and influence those.
But he wants it for himself. That's the problem.
Well, it's now on Jude Bellingham to respond, because he, all being well, assuming that he plays himself into any kind of form at Real Madrid and fitness, he'll get picked for November. And then it's about how does he react around camps. The last camp of the year, there'll be nothing until March. It's a long time. All he's got to do is, come to St George's Park, do everything that's asked of him, keep a relatively low profile, importantly, perform well in the 1 or 2 games, however many he plays, and this will go away. It's in his gift. It is in his gift.
Let me just ask you, so if you sat here right now and they're saying that you named the top 5 players that Tuchel can't do without in the World Cup next year, put Harry Kane at the top, obviously, probably put Declan Rice in there. Is Jude Bellingham in that 5 players that he cannot do without?
I don't think he should be.
I'm not sure he is.
Because the conversation on the eve of the first game, if everyone's fit, is going to be how does Thomas Tuchel get Kane, Saka, Cole Palmer, Phil Foden and Jude Bellingham in the same team, and then one of them inevitably will be left out. The first game might not go as planned, and then the first question, probably from you, to Thomas Tuchel will be, do you not think you need Cole Palmer playing? And he'll go, I can't play with 12.
Yeah.
Why have you dropped Morgan Rodgers?
Why have you dropped Morgan Rodgers? He was so good in Serbia.
He played so well in Serbia. Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's the job, isn't it? I would say that the way that they look like they're building the team, and 4-2-3-1, Bellingham and Palmer in particular are just completely interchangeable, and Rodgers can all three can play as a 10 in that system. Now, Guardiola's often talked about Foden being at his best century, and it doesn't really play him there. So you tell me if Foden could play as a 10 in that system.
He's always been a bit subdued with England, hasn't he? It's not really worked for him. He's one of these players, the Paul Scholes type, the John Barnes type, going back over a few years.
I think he's a bit scarred by what happened at the Euros. Phil Foden coming off the back of his best season ever, and kind of went into a tournament thinking that he could be like the star of the whole thing and win the tournament for England because he was playing so well.
He's not playing every week for City either, is he? I mean, that's
not, but he was ahead of Euros, and suddenly at the Euros he became, instead of being the solution to everything, became the problem, didn't he? At some point,
he's in a better team with a better coach at City as well. Everything works around him, doesn't it? And I think that's the thing with Foden. That I don't know, he's just not really quite hit it off with England, has he?
So I think if it is 4-2-3-1 and Elliot Anderson is making a really impressive case, I think to be a 6 alongside Declan Rice, then it does at least lend itself to saying, well, if I want to rotate my 10s, then it doesn't upset the team structure too much because everything else is slotted in around. Saka will be on one side and Anthony Gordon maybe off the left. He's probably the man in possession at the moment.
Can you have Jude Bellingham at a World Cup who's not in the starting team? Would it be a pain?
Again, that's on him, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is.
And this is going to be, the key is going to be how he reacts in November, and then obviously in March and the early part of next year. Because if he shows the right attitude, and if he's prepared to be someone who's got to earn his place like everyone else, then yes, of course, it shouldn't be an issue. Why should it be an issue?
Because if certain players aren't playing, there can be a problem around the camp, and that's the issue, isn't it? I mean,
that's on the players.
Yeah, I mean, I think
it's also the noise that comes with it as well, not just him.
You see, I think back to the Euros, right? And there was all this noise about him not doing media stuff, and he had a few chips away at the press and this, that, and the other. And then on his day off, he brings in his documentary team, doesn't he? He's doing a documentary in the England camp. It's like, well, you can't have it both ways. You can't be saying, "Oh, you're too intrusive," and leave us alone, and this, that, and the other. And then on his day off, when he should be resting up, have the Jude Bellingham documentary team filming around the England camp. How does that make the players feel? Because he's not doing his share with us, but he's happy to do his own thing with his mum and dad and his brother. That's just like that. That's the whole big time Charlie thing, isn't it? This idea that a player thinks he's better than everybody else because he plays for Real Madrid and he does. It's fantastic. He's won the Champions League, but like I said before, it's not as important to Real Madrid as Harry Kane is to Bayern Munich, and you never hear these sort of issues with Harry Kane.
Well, I guess the point really is that if we try and spin this into a positive, is that it's all kind of out now. This has been rumbling along for probably a couple of years actually, and now it's kind of out in the open. It's a talking point. Thomas Tuchel, rightly or wrongly, put this out there in June, by talking about how my mother finds some of his behaviour repulsive. Not the best choice of words, and I do have some. I mean, his English is flawless, basically, but you have to have some sympathy with the fact that he's obviously doing it all in a second language. But he's tried, I think, privately, from what I hear, but obviously publicly as well, to just get it out there that the guy's brilliant. He's a fantastic talent. Yes, I want him in my team, but that's not enough. You have to be what I need you to be in camp. You have to behave the right way. You have to fall into line and pull together for the greater good.
Just to wrap on Jude Bellingham then, I'll ask you both. Does he start England's first game at a World Cup next summer?
I'm going to say yes, he does, because I think I'm going to invest in Jude here, and I'm going to say he's going to respond in the right way. He's going to start producing his best football. Let's hope that, from an England point of view, that the fact that he's had this sort of delayed start to the season meant he's had a bit more of a break. He obviously was involved with the Club World Cup, so hopefully that will help him at the back end, and he will be starting in that England team next summer.
I think it's 50-50 because people are forgetting that he's had it's a bit of a change at Real Madrid as well. A new coach has come in, Xabi Alonso. We don't quite know where he fits in the team. I can see Bellingham being in and out of the team at Real this season because Xabi Alonso's trying to work his way in. So I'm going to edge on the side of saying no, but we'll ask your opinion as well.
Yes, because I just don't think that he can leave him out. He'll feel like he has to pick him regardless. And I think that's a tricky position for an international manager to be in.
Well, we'll wait and see. We'll have to play New Caledonia, though.
Well, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking to Mark about New Caledonia and Gibraltar. Well, Mark, last week you were in Gibraltar. Perhaps not the spot that you would pick for top-level football, but you were there, not for Gibraltar's national team, but for New Caledonia. You're going to have to tell us a bit more about it.
Yeah, so the World Cup playoffs are in March to decide the final two qualifiers for the World Cup, and New Caledonia, oddly enough, have qualified for the World Cup playoffs because they lost to New Zealand in the Oceania final. So it's a strange one, but basically saw the fact that they were playing in Gibraltar, and it seemed, well, rather than go to New Caledonia, which is 900 miles east of Brisbane, probably easier to see them in Gibraltar. So I went to Gibraltar to do a piece on this team that has a shot at qualifying for the World Cup, and it was interesting just how passionate they are and how, actually they won the game 2-0. So, they prove their worth. But just the kind of the journey they have to get there, in more ways than one, the journey from, qualifying from Oceania, but the journey to Malta. So basically, it took them 24 and a half hours of airtime just to be in the air to get to Gibraltar. They left their capital city of Noumea, flew to Singapore through to Paris to Malaga, and then from Malaga to Gibraltar was an hour on a bus. And all that was in economy. So coach class for our American listeners. So they got off the plane, train. A couple of days later, won a game. So, and then he went back the other way. So, they played the game on Wednesday night, finished the game at 9 local time. At 2:30 in the morning, they were being picked up by the coach to go back to Malaga for the journey back home, and none of them complained. They were just loving it.
Well, I was about to say that the piece will be going live on ESPN.com this week, but the intro to the piece, obviously, that I've read, seems to suggest that the players, even though you're talking about what is an absolutely nightmare journey to play a game of football, that they were quite happy to do it.
Absolutely love it. Their view is that we're playing international football for our country. It's in Gibraltar, but why should we complain? So one of the guys works in a supermarket in New Caledonia. The guy I spoke to who scored the second goal, he's a Paralympian coach. He trains, or he's a guide for blind sprinters. So he went to the Paralympics last year in Paris. So they've all got day jobs, but they all actually love just representing their country, and it's kind of a complex story with New Caledonia. Christian Carambeau, by the way, the French World Cup winner, he's from New Caledonia and chose to play for France because New Caledonia is an overseas territory of France, and the New Caledonian citizens are French citizens and they get to vote in the French presidential elections. But it's complex in the way that they were only admitted to FIFA in 2004 because they had to seek permission of the French Football Federation to do it. And even last week there was a kind of an almost a diplomatic incident whereby the Gibraltar FA announced this friendly to their fans on the website about a month ago. Gibraltar flag, New Caledonia flag, and within 20 minutes they had a phone call saying you need to change it because you can't put the New Caledonia flag up without putting the French flag up first. So they had to change that, and then at the game they had to buy a new flagpole because they didn't have enough flagpoles for the flags. So they had the Gibraltar flag, the FIFA flag, the UEFA flag, the Fair Play flag, and what should have been the New Caledonia flag was the French flag, followed by the new pole and the new flag for the New Caledonia flag.
What was the standard of football like?
Well, see, the Gibraltar team, they had a couple of players. So there's one like James Skelner who's at Man United. So he's 19-year-old, come through the ranks. So I'd say Gibraltar's level would probably be League Two, National League. And when I was watching New Caledonia train, I thought these are quite a way off that. But they turned up and won the game. So what struck me is that the physical build of the Gibraltar players is what you see, in the UK. The big lads have got an athlete's physique, and the New Caledonia players weren't really like that. And I thought they get bounced off the ball and they'd struggle physically, but they really didn't. And it kind of shows you that you don't have to have all these kind of new, protein shakes and all that sort of thing. Because after the game, when I was interviewing the guy who scored the goal, he walks out the dressing room with an apple. I mean, how often you see footballers with an apple these days? It's usually a protein shake or a kind of a gel.
You said one of them was vaping, didn't you?
Yeah, there was sat outside on the steps. Yeah, there's a couple on the vapes and a couple on the phone. And that was the... See, for me, the interesting part of this is that these guys that were playing, they're basically one or two steps up from us guys here. That we've all played football and we've all think, we could have done something, but you never quite get the chance. But these guys have managed to do that. Yes, they play for Gibraltar and New Caledonia, so maybe it's not as difficult for them, but they're still the average guy on the street, basically, that are playing for their countries and have a chance of playing at the World Cup. Now, the coach, who is a French guy, used to coach at Nantes, he's been in charge for 2 or 3 years, and he said we have a 1% chance of qualifying for the World Cup, but it's still a 1% chance.
James, can I ask you, around about, 10 years ago, there was genuine talk that nations like San Marino, Andorra, shouldn't be involved in World Cup qualifiers with established nations because they were turning up and they were getting battered 9 and 10 every week. I know that still is happening occasionally. The standard has got better, obviously. The expanded World Cup to 48 teams is going to allow for some smaller nations to get through it. I think the Faroe Islands are still in with a shout of getting there. Obviously, New Caledonia are as well. Where do you stand on these smaller nations and their place in world football? Are you in favour of them having a chance to get to the World Cup where they're going to meet the likes of Brazil and England? Do you think that they should be kind of separated off into their own competition because it's more of their own standard?
Well, I think it's difficult because my answer is now not going to be in keeping with the fact that Mark's done a very nice genial piece about some minnows trying to get to the... To me, the World Cup final should be the best of the best, and I'm not in favour of expanding the competition as they've done it to 48. They're talking already about going to 64. Yeah. They'll probably expand it enough that New Caledonia will be able to get in anyway without qualifying before too long. That, to me, defeats the point of this, is that there has to... we all love these stories of, the underdogs and the sort of the part timers, and because we can see ourselves in it. If, as Mark says, if we'd been a bit better or we'd taken a bit more risk or we'd had a bit more luck or born with a bit more talent, we might have been able to start at that level. And then who knows? That's great and that has a place, but the World Cup finals is not it. And it's the same sort of situation with the Club World Cup. That was expanded too fast. And it diluted the competition. And I think football has to be careful with this because, it's an ever increasingly competitive marketplace. Entertainment, it's as much entertainment as it is sport. And if you keep diluting your ultimate product, you are going to get people who will, switch off from it, not be that interested in it. And America's going to be a really interesting case for that last summer. And I saw it this year in the Club World Cup. You've got the FIFA obviously trumpeting this fantastic competition, come and watch the best of the best, but it's up against the Stanley Cup, it's up against baseball's on every night, it's up against the NBA finals, which went to Game 7 for the first time in about 10 years. People, the domestic audience is way more interested in that, and you're trying to pitch the NBA Game 7 against the team ranked 10 versus 71st in football. I mean, it's from a marketing point of view, you're bang to rights. And I do think football has to make sure they were not going to do this. They won't do it because there's too much money in it. But I'm of the view, I'm a purist. I think the World Cup finals and the European Championships and the Club World Cup, if it's going to stick around, which it clearly is, should be scaled down. Every match matters. The best of the best.
So I think the issue for me with this is that you take the English FA Cup, you've got, because it's a straight knockout, you have got a situation where maybe a pub side or a Conference North side can progress and play a Premier League side. That to me, I quite like that kind of romantic side of football. The difference with this and the Club World Cup and the World Cup is that it's not a straight knockout. You end up at the World Cup in a group of 4 with 3 games, possibly against Brazil, Holland, and Mexico. And that could be quite, I don't want to say embarrassing is the wrong word, because obviously they wouldn't be embarrassed to be there, but that could be quite a tough watch for people. Well,
and also, exactly, and you would watch it if it was a straight knockout game. But if that team, and I'm not going to pick one for a fear of offending someone, but that Minnows team has already lost 2 group games, who is going to watch the 3rd group game as a neutral?
Yeah.
Nobody. So it's not, this is the thing, I mean, it's obviously, it's the World Cup, but it's kind of the World League Cup a bit. It's like the Champions League. There are leagues in the World Cup. There are group stages, and that nullifies most of the sort of free novelty value that these sort of European, whichever continent they come from, the minnows kind of provide.
Yeah, I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see behind me. This is the pitch that was taken on the team bus after the game, and I just think it shows the joy of the whole.
Yeah, I mean, you can't argue against images like that.
Exactly, but you're right. I mean, there is talk of changing the kind of the UEFA qualification process to almost like a Champions League style Swiss model, isn't it? Because
what was the attendance?
They didn't give it, but I reckon it was about 2,000. It's only small. It's a 2-sided ground.
To be fair, that's that's actually more than I thought.
Yeah, but it's difficult because I agree with what you're saying, and I think the chances of New Caledonia qualifying are very slim. They accept that themselves, but I guess you can't close off the routes to these. This confederation. Obviously, Oceania usually has one, and that's generally New Zealand. Obviously, Australia don't play in Oceania anymore. They're in the Asian Federation, so they basically have 1.5 positions. So the half position will always go to New Caledonia or Tahiti or Tonga, and they're probably not going to qualify. But you have to keep that route open just in case.
Yeah, I'm not saying they can't qualify. I'm just saying that qualification hardly matters these days anyway for the elite sides, and we do and we are. I'm very conscious of my own bias there, that I'm probably coming at this from the point of view of England, Italy, Spain, France.
And England fan is your team is going to be there anyway.
Yeah, I mean the qualification is virtually guaranteed, not helped by the fact that. Again, it's been diluted to the point that, it used to be the group winners were the only ones guaranteed, or the top 2 or someone might go into a playoff. Now there's such a massive margin for error for the top teams. I'm not saying that sides like this shouldn't have a chance. It's just that you want to ensure that the best of the best turn up every time, and that product, when it is the World Cup, the biggest show in town, is as pure as it can be and not diluted by I'm sorry, but it shouldn't be diluted by League Two, National League quality.
We've got a scenario now where Italy might miss out on the third successive World Cup. Italy, is it 4 times winners, 5 times winners? And, New Zealand are there, New Caledonia may be there, and there's teams from Central America that will take that place. And it's like, well, Italy, their history deserves to be there, but their current form doesn't. It's tricky, isn't it? Because you'd want Italy at a World Cup, wouldn't you, obviously? I mean, so there's been reports over the weekend about UEFA considering the Swiss model to use the Champions League, Europa League format for their World Cup qualifiers in Euros. I mean, I'm kind of up for that. I think that'd be quite a good thing. I mean, so basically you don't play everybody else, but you still play enough teams from certain different levels. So would that work? Would that make things more interesting? Because I've got to say the England games this week.
Well, I'd say the perfect case for that is watching England's group for this World Cup.
Dismal.
It is. It's just there's no jeopardy. It's not exciting. They knew before a ball was kicked, I think, that they were going to qualify. You can kind of tell when you get the FA bods at the draw going, well, it's going to be decided by Serbia away. So, you just have to play one game essentially and qualify for the World Cup. If you win it, you're at the World Cup, which is essentially what the FA was saying right off the bat. I think that probably tells you everything about the qualification process.
Yeah, and it would freshen up qualification. I have my doubts about the Swiss model in general. I think you think about the Champions League group stages, it's sort of, well, I don't know about you guys, but I go to these games in September, October, November, you just think, well, what does any of this mean? We don't really know what, again, there's such a big margin for error for qualification, and you're risking that for giving New Caledonia a chance to maybe think for 2 or 3 games until they lose those, that they've got a chance of qualification. Is that worth diluting it? Now, you could argue that it is, and I guess from the point of view of, at least we'd see different matchups. You're talking about England's group. You sort of think, Andorra again.
Again.
It's just like, oh, here we are, here we go again. Another sort of 3-4-5-0. The players don't really enjoy it either. I don't think.
The pace of the game is so much slower. The fans, Tuchel had to go at the fans after the game last week, the Wales game, and he has a point. And that's a different debate altogether about should England move the games around to play. Because I mean, obviously, me and Rob, both from the Northwest. We've got kids. You can't take a young kid to an England game if you live in Manchester or anywhere north of Birmingham because you can't get back in time. And it's kind of selfish of the FA to play virtually all the games down there. And then when they do take one away, it's Andorra at Villa Park. It's almost dismissive of the England fan base. But that's a different matter entirely in the sense that, the FA have their decisions to make. But
took Hungary to Molineux the other year, lost 4-0.
Yeah, God. Yeah. Yeah. Should we just send international football? Should we just call it?
On that note, we'll take a short break. When we come back, we'll be talking about the Premier League, Liverpool and Mo Salah. Well, no Premier League action this week because of internationals, but a couple of burning questions that we're still going to try and answer. James, you were at Chelsea, Liverpool before the international break. A lot of talk still around Mo Salah and his impact. You were obviously at that Chelsea game. Is it just a slow start, do you think, for Salah, or has Arne Slot got a bigger problem?
Well, I think it's both, because I think that there were moments in the second half where he's got the ball on his left foot in the box or just outside the box, and you're thinking, I mean, last season you're just thinking goal. Yeah. But you think, well, at least this is the high danger, and he's putting the ball in the stands and just shanking it off time. You're just thinking, well, that's not a system problem, that's not a managerial problem, that's a Mo Salah problem. But then obviously there's a bigger issue with Liverpool in just the team dynamic and the fact that, obviously Florian Wirtz didn't start that game. They tried to sort of restore a bit more of last season's balance into the midfield. Szoboszlai went back into that position. Conor Bradley came in at right back. He got taken off at half time. It didn't work. They didn't look, as dynamic and as cohesive as they had done when they won the league. So all of that is going to affect the positions that Mo Salah gets into. But as I say, he still got into a couple of them. Yeah. I mean, within, I think, 30 seconds of the start of the second half, Wirtz produced that magical, it might have even been his first touch, magical, what should have been an assist for Salah. And he skews it off his right foot and goes wide. And you're just thinking, well, if you're on a slot, you're just thinking, well, he's letting the side down a bit there. There's nothing I can do. There's nothing anyone else can do there. We've got him in that position. He's then got to execute it. So yeah, there is a definite concern.
Wayne Rooney absolutely hammered him on he was working as a pundit for the Chelsea-Liverpool game, and he basically said, look, he's just not working hard enough. He's not doing anything for Conor Bradley. He's just basically stood there with his hands on his hips, going forward. He's never worked that hard, but when he doesn't work that hard defensively, he has to contribute more from an attacking sense. I checked out his goals record in the last few months this morning. So since the start of February, he's got 14 goals for Liverpool, 6 are penalties. So that's basically 8 from open play. It's not Mo Salah level, that. And I think he's definitely. He's had a dip. I mean, he's 33 now. He signed his new contract in the summer. I just think that African nations coming up in December, World Cup at the end of the year, Egypt qualified. I think Mo Salah's thinking, this for me is about my international season this year. It's the World Cup and the African nations. And, who can blame him? He's basically done everything he wants to do with Liverpool. But I suppose who can blame him? Yes, you can, because he signed a big contract at Liverpool. But, I do wonder whether signing the contracts in the summer, I think Liverpool got to the situation, as we know, they had 3 players out of contract. They had Trent, they had Virgil van Dijk, and they had Mo Salah. They knew that Alexander-Arnold was going. They just knew that. They couldn't afford to lose a second one from that 3. I just don't think they could do it. So they gave them both new contracts. And I think over that period of their new contracts, we'll see them both, disappear from the scene. I think Salah will go first.
Just on his age, obviously, Mark and I have watched a lot of Man United, and I remember Robin van Persie was obviously sensational when he joined from Arsenal. He had a great season. It seemed to me, and obviously if Robin was here, I imagine he would tell you something different. It seemed to me that age caught up with him very, very quickly. I'm not suggesting it was overnight, but he went from being this kind of elite, really sharp Premier League striker till, I don't know, a year later, possibly looking off the pace. Now, it happens to everyone. Age catches up with everyone, not least the 3 of us. Do you think there is a sense maybe with Mo Salah that Marcus just mentioned, that is 33, you cannot carry on at the same level again and again and again, that eventually it does catch up with you? And sometimes with players, it can be quite quick.
It can be quite quick. I think it's too soon to suggest that age has caught up with Mo Salah. I'm just looking at some of the stats we've got down here, and I'm not a massive proponent of XG, but 24-25 season, after 7 games, Liverpool's XG, or Mo Salah's XG was 4.1. This year it's 1.96. Now, Mo Salah, is not responsible for that dip. That is going to be a consequence of the chances that the team are creating for him and the positions that they're getting him into. Now, obviously, he is an element of that, but it's pretty clear to see, if we take a step back from just talking about Salah, that Liverpool have been nowhere near where I think anybody expected them to be at the moment. They're trying to integrate new players, multiple new players. Obviously, Alexander Isak's the main sort of forward in that system. Florian Wirtz has changed the dynamic of the midfield, and they've lost a lot of key players in those attacking positions already. So those sort of, individual connections and understandings that Mo Salah would have with so many players is not there. And to sort of suggest that, he's just going to pick that up and do it on his own, well, maybe what we're asking a 33-year-old to do is to be the match winner at the very highest level in the Premier League year after year after year. He's not going to be able to do that forever, because nobody can. Yeah. But I think it's too soon to suggest he can't do it this season.
I think he's lost his energy. What I mean is not his energy, but the team's energy, because Darwin Núñez and Luis Diaz provided a lot of Mo Salah's energy. They basically did the running for him, and he was able to capitalise on that.
Well, it's funny that he was involved in a little social media spat at one stage during the season, where someone had tweeted about the upgrades, about Wirtz and Isak, what an upgrade on Núñez and Diaz, and he kind of leapt to their defence on social media and kind of said, well, hang on a minute, why don't we give them the props and wait and see kind of thing. Maybe it is a question of him having those kind of relationships and people who provided the energy, and that's missing now for him.
And the other one is Diogo Jota. I mean, I don't know how close they were, but you don't know in the fullness of time. He might talk about how much that's affected him. It may well have affected his ability on the pitch.
I think I can't help but affect everyone in that dressing room. I mean, Virgil van Dijk, I think, has touched on that a little bit, hasn't he, in one of his post-match interviews after one of these 3 defeats, and kind of said, like, unless you're in our dressing room, you don't understand the impact that's had. And I don't think you can ever tell, can you, unless you're in there?
No, I mean, just on Salah specifically, I was speaking at an ex-Liverpool player about him recently, and he was basically saying that, he said the thing with Salah is, he's always done this, he said, just watch him. He said, what he'll do is he'll basically conserve his energy for the first 70 minutes. He'll drift to the left, he'll drift to the right, and he'll just wait, and then these last 20 minutes is when he scores his goals. So Salah's clever, isn't he? He does do that a lot. He'll basically wait until his opposite numbers kind of worn himself out a little bit, and his concentration starts to go, and that's when he'll pounce. And I mean, I was at the Bournemouth game start of the season when he scored like 94th minute, so he does have that in him. I think one thing I would say as well, they've got Man United at the weekend. No team has scored or conceded more Salah goals than Man United, 16 all total. So He's got his.
I think that's the worst possible game that Liverpool could have in the circumstances. United at home, a team that they should be beating.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't think it's probably the best. It's Man United at Anfield. They haven't come close to winning this in 2016. And Salah might think that's his chance to lift his season off again, that he always does well against Man United. I mean, I don't know who's going to be marking him at the weekend, but whoever he's not going to be very good. So this could be Salah's...
A sweeping generalisation.
You tell me a good Man United fullback that can take on Mo Salah. Anyway, but the point is, maybe he sees that as his launch pad. But I do think overall, I think he's looking at this season as Egypt rather than Liverpool.
Well, next we're going to talk about Arsenal. One of your teams, James. Is the handbrake on at the moment, or is it off?
Well, I find this quite ironic, this conversation, because of course that phrase was coined by Arsene Wenger. It was a sort of Wengerism about how he'd talk about his players not being able to play with a sort of fluidity and freedom because he felt they were inhibited. It wasn't anything that sort of he was doing. You know, he was the ultimate sort of artist in the way he wanted his teams to play. So the fact that there's now another Arsenal manager in 2025 facing this criticism feels like it's kind of come full circle a little bit. But I do think Mikel Arteta's got a bit of a case to answer. They are too conservative. They are reliant on set pieces too much. And I think the comparison that's been made between Mikel Arteta and Jose Mourinho is valid, but I think there's also a comparison to be made between Arteta and Gareth Southgate. In that,
don't kill him. Don't kill him.
In that the squad that he inherited was a mess. The culture was terrible. The place was low on confidence and they were a mile away from where they need to be. They've now got to the brink of winning the Premier League. They've been second for 3 years in a row. And this squad this year has got more attacking, exciting options in it than he's ever had before. And there is no guarantee that he can manage that. And what he's got to do is flick that switch from worrying about what goes the other way, worrying about history, worrying about all the things that he was right to worry about at the time, which is exactly what Gareth Southgate did. But then where Gareth just fell short was in saying we now have the ability, the confidence and the freedom of expression to go and get what we think we deserve, not let's not lose it. They're all carrying the Ming vase across the floor.
I thought about this the week because I think Arsenal are really good this season. And I saw them at Newcastle and they got that really dramatic late win. And maybe that could unlock it, or maybe that's the game that he realises that sometimes you've got to go over broke, because you're right, I think his natural instinct is to be cautious. And I think over the years, you look at all the managers that have won things, they've all been gamblers, Ferguson, Wenger, Mourinho, Klopp, Guardiola, that when push comes to shove the last 10 minutes, they'll all go for broke. Arteta's instinct is to be a bit more cautious. And I think it's interesting, he has said in the past that one of his big kind of mentors is David Moyes. He played for him at Everton for quite a long time. And David Moyes, great manager in the Premier League era, but he's very cautious. First off, I mean, I saw at United that his natural instinct was to be cautious rather than go for broke. Arteta has to get over that, because I don't think as a manager you can win the very big honours, and Southgate might be the same. Unless you're prepared to risk something, you're not going to win something, because the top managers, look at all the ones that win the Champions League, they're all risk takers.
The only thing I would say about that in Arteta's defence is that you don't win the Premier League in September and October, but you can lose it. And if you gamble to a point where you're dropping points, say it had gone the other way. Say in Newcastle, you're drawing one each, and you throw everyone forward, Newcastle break, and you lose 2-1. No one's going to go, I love that for Mikel. That's fantastic.
But I think they've been dead unlucky, because whenever I've seen them without Martin Odegaard, they're not the same team. And he gets injured all the time. But when he came on at Newcastle, he changed the game, because when he plays, they've got that creativity through the middle of the pitch, which they don't have when he's not there. He's the one player they can't replace, because everything else goes out wide. And I think with him in the team, they are a better team and a different team. But again, it all gets down to the fact that Arteta has to be more of a gambler.
When I interviewed Gareth Southgate before the Euro 2024, I put that exact point to him, Robert, about people wanting to see all this attacking football, but if it goes wrong, the criticisms are coming your way.
Parsley against Greece is a case in point.
Yeah. And I remember he said, it seems some people want fantasy football, but very few teams play that way. And he made the point about Didier Deschamps. And then he sort of said, he was getting a lot of criticism for the way that France were playing. And he just said, I've seen it where coaches get killed if you get done on transition, you get accused of being naive. And that, of course, would be the criticism levelled against Mikel Arteta. But I think your squad has to dictate your approach. And Arteta in previous seasons, including last season, has had to adapt and sort of modify their approach and be a bit more pragmatic. They don't. They've got everything. They've got everything they need to win the league. I'm not entirely convinced by Victor Gyökeres, but he's good enough. They've got everything that they need. So it's on them to go and grasp the nettle, go and seize the moment. And he's just falling. Well, I say he's falling fractionally short of it. I think there've been encouraging signs. You mentioned the Newcastle situation. And the way that they made the attacking changes, he's right. He dropped Odegaard into a deeper position. They went for it, and they got their rewards. Yes, it came from a set piece, but I do think that there are signs that he's starting to flick that switch. But he's got to keep doing it over the next 7 months.
Well, we're running out of time slightly, but it wouldn't be a Football Reports podcast if we didn't talk about Man United and Ruben Amorim. During the international break, Mark Radcliffe has said that he thinks that Ruben Amorim should get 3 years.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by that? Do you think he's got a point, or is he talking nonsense?
I'm not surprised by it because Sir Jim Ratcliffe has said a few kind of off-the-cuff things in the last 12, 18 months since he's been at Man United, but I actually checked out because I remember something very similar about Erik ten Hag that he came out with, and it was 3 weeks before he fired Erik ten Hag. He said he's a very good coach. So the words about Amorim are obviously welcomed by Amorim, but we all know what his record has been. It's statistically by far the worst Man United manager of the Premier League era. They haven't beaten anyone other than a promoted team this season or a 10-man team in Chelsea. So there's not a lot to say he's turned the corner. They haven't won away since Leicester last season, relegated Leicester. So obviously Liverpool away at the weekend, that's probably the ultimate test for Man United. They've already had one of the ultimate tests with Man City where they lost 3-0. So I don't know. I mean, you cover United every day, Robert. It seems a bit presumptuous to me for Radcliffe to say that. I don't think he's ever going to get 3 years, but what do you think?
No, I think part of it is that you've seen sometimes with what Jim Radcliffe has said that he's got this kind of way about him that if someone says someone says the sky's blue, he's going to say, oh, well, actually, no, it's purple, because he just enjoys having that kind of influence and that ability just to say the exact opposite. I'm not suggesting that he is sat there thinking he's definitely going to give him 3 years. I do think it's maybe him showing that he's still supportive of Amorim. I mean, we've discussed on this podcast before that really Radcliffe needs disappointment to work out because it was his first big appointment, and if he was to get this wrong after what happened with Dan Ashworth, that there would be serious questions asked about Radcliffe and his team. So he's obviously desperate for Amorim to work out. And my personal opinion is I think that you should give Amorim more time. Obviously that can't go on indefinitely because you can't go on without winning back-to-back Premier League games.
Yes, that's huge, James, because he did reference to Jim Radcliffe, Mikel Arteta, who said it's comparable to Arteta. And I think there are some similarities, but obviously there are differences. Man United is a much bigger club in the sense that the demand and expectancy on it than Arsenal. And also when Arteta had come in, Arsenal had really been in kind of malaise for 10 years. Arsene Wenger's time had drifted. Unai Emery came in. There wasn't the same sort of expectancy. They're out of the Champions League. Is it a fair comparison, or did Arteta have it a little bit easier than Amorim?
Well, he did win the FA Cup.
Yeah,
in his first season, and
COVID Cup though we not count.
Well, but it was really important in validating a young manager in his first job, to say this is why we back this guy to make the difficult decisions, and there isn't enough. This is why Jim Ratcliffe has got to come out. Which, by the way, isn't this just man who gave manager contracts, says managers serve out contracts? Yeah. I mean, that's it. It's not like he's going, he's going to be here for 10 years.
But man who gave a contract to a manager and sacked in 3 months later.
Yeah, no, but to me, it's not quite the ringing endorsement that everybody sort of seemed to suggest it is. It's like, well, we gave him this 3-year deal and we'd like him to see out this 3-year deal. Well, yeah, of course you would, because you don't want to pay him off. Yeah. You don't want to admit you've got it wrong. But, he's not winning enough matches to earn the authority to say it's my way or the highway. What Arteta did was he was way more pragmatic. He won that FA Cup, which is absolutely vital. The way they won it in the semi-final and the final, they had, I think, something like 5 shots or 6 shots on target in the 2 games, and they scored twice in each, and they won Chelsea and then City. It was very much a means to an end, and that trophy was something he could point to on the mantelpiece when he was ripping up the contract of a player and say to the board, "This is why I'm doing this." Because you're going to get more of these. Now, he hasn't got any since.
No, but Ten Hag could say that when he won 2 trophies and his direction was going nowhere.
But was there a structure to United? Was there a cohesion and a clear plan about the way they were going to play?
Absolutely not.
Team? Well, there was here. And so because he had that and he had that FA Cup win, that gave him the authority. And it was still brave of the owners to back him, because you mentioned COVID. The fans weren't particularly happy with the style of football. And I think had there been full stadiums in the sort of early part of that second season, he would have been right up against it. And he's never admitted it publicly, but I think he would have been fighting to save his job. Whereas, of course, Amorim has not got the trophy. He's got 75,000 fans who are not entirely happy, although United fans generally are pretty loyal, particularly at home, towards their managers. And he's not getting the results.
I just wonder if it's Saturday.
A point a game for a year.
Yeah, if we're sat in the next international break ends in November, that's 4 games away. Do you think he'll still be in charge?
Yes, because I genuinely don't think that they are even contemplating right now sacking him. Obviously, that it can't carry on. You're right. You can't carry on not winning back-to-back Premier League games and averaging a point every game. You can't carry on. I mean, and again, if Ruben was sat here, he would tell you the same. Like, he's going to live and die by results, and they've not been there. I would suggest that there are reasons why his record is as bad as it is. I thought last season was an absolute fire, to be honest, and he got shoved into a situation that was absolutely dreadful.
Yeah, but that's rubbish, that, because how many managers, when they say, I want to wait until the end of the season, they don't. Klopp came in mid-season, Arteta came in mid-season. You take the job and it's there. You can't have a rosy garden whereby, I want to come in the summer and I want to play my certain system. Yeah, no problem. We'll wait 7 months for you. You've got to take the job when it comes along. I mean, you can't have this situation where it's all in your favour.
If that had been April,
yeah, fair enough.
You could make the argument.
I just think, though, I mean, there's a game that sticks out that someone at United has kind of mentioned to me a couple of times. Brentford away at the end of last year in April. United go to Brentford and they're about 4-1 down, I think, in an hour. They'll end up losing 4-3. That team that day had Obi up front starting, Harry Almas and Tyler Fredrickson. Tyler Fredrickson is nowhere near at the level right now to play for Man United. Obi's been sent back to the academy, so he's not even figuring in matchday squads, and Harry Almas is at Sheffield Wednesday. Now, Ruben Amorim did that because he had to beat Bilbao in the week to progress in the Europa League. Now, he would have every right ahead of that Brentford game last year to say, well, actually, if I'm looking after myself, I'm going to pick my best team now in the hope that I get a Premier League win against a team who didn't really have much to play for. And if we lose against Bilbao and we get knocked out, well, that's sad, but actually I'm going to look after my own record. And he didn't. He put what he felt was best for the club first. Now, I'm not suggesting that he can survive, carrying on 6 months with those kind of excuses, but there is a reason why, when that Premier League record gets chucked at him, there is a reason why it's that bad.
Yeah.
Now, again, that can't go on forever, and if it's still terrible in January, then obviously there'll be questions to answer. I genuinely would just say to him, we're not going to look at the manager until the summer. Give him the season. Just give him January, give him the season, and then see where you're at. I mean, I know you're completely opposite and say, well, why would you want to write off a season? And I get that argument, but you cannot keep chopping and changing managers and not giving them the right conditions to succeed and then go, you failed. For a manager to turn around and go, well, you didn't help.
There's also not a leading candidate out there either. Yeah. I think that's another element of this. Is if there was someone sat there, if we're talking about, I don't know, the name that's coming to my head was Pochettino, just because he's been linked so many times before.
They missed the boat, haven't they, with a load of them? Thomas Frank, Thomas Tuchel, Pochettino.
Yeah. Look, I mean, if somebody comes in, even if it's Amorim, just says, look, this isn't working, the system, the players aren't buying it, let's just go 4-2-3-1, then you might have, seriously, they've got players who can play that system. Certainly overloaded up front with players who can play that. I don't think any of the defenders are comfortable in the back three apart from Maguire because it protects him. It's just a completely pointless
Amorim's argument to that was if he walks into the dressing room and goes, well, we're not playing 3-4-3 anymore, we're playing 4-4-3-3, the players are going to go,
they're doing that already. They do it every time they train a session. They're doing, here we go again, 3-4-3. A year in, they haven't learned how to play the system. So it's like, at some point, change it. I mean, look, the goalkeeper might make a difference, but you can see the players that they're not comfortable playing there. They're not good enough in that system. So maybe Amorim should think, look, these guys aren't. It'd be much better for Amorim to make him look a much better coach to say, like, listen, guys, it's not working. Let's go forward at the back and we'll work on it in a different way.
I think it makes him look weak now if he changes with the players and with everyone else around the club.
That Europa League final, he must look back on that and just think, what a moment that could have been. You know, if they'd won that, they win that game, and we're not having this conversation.
Yeah, they win that game. Oh, we can't play in the Champions League because it's too hard for us. That's what he's saying. He finds an excuse in everything. You can't say we don't want to qualify for the Champions League because we can't handle the games.
But you can't. I mean, if they'd won that Europa League final and they still had exactly the same Premier League record that they had now, sat here today, do you not think I don't think anybody would be talking about Ruben Amorim and his future at Man United, would they?
Well, he's also missing midweek. I mean, at the very basic level, he's missing midweek.
Well, he had one this season. That was Grimsby.
One of his Champions League games. If he'd won that final, he may have played. I don't know, a low-level Champions League side at Old Trafford, where you could have gone, and won 2-0, and all of a sudden the pressure wasn't building ahead of Sunderland at home. At the moment, he's completely exposed to Premier League results.
That's a really good point, actually, because I remember, and we've talked about this on this podcast before, that, he's got a clear week, he can train with the group, that's really going to help with the system. Do you think the flip side of that is that the players are sensing the pressure because it's building over 7 days?
Massively. I genuinely don't think that that. Again, Ruben would probably tell you something different, but he thinks it's a good thing. If they were in the Europa League this season, you play, with all due respect to FC20, you play FC20 on a Thursday night. You've been beaten at the weekend. You beat FC20 3-1 or 2-0 at Old Trafford, and then all of a sudden it's not a Premier League win, but the pressure eases slightly, and you're feeling better going into the weekend. At the moment, the week after that Brentford game where they lost 3-1 was just horrific for him. Like, there's just no hiding place. It's all over newspapers and Sky Sports News, and we're talking about podcasts. Sorry, Ruben. But he's just completely exposed to it all, and there's no escaping it. There's no respite.
This thing about, we've got a week on the training pitch now, it's like just say to the guys, you'll just go out and just keep digging that hole even deeper, because, it's not working. An extra week of training this system when they're not taking it in after so long, do something different. I mean, like people say about if you're a coach facing Man United, you spend all week thinking, how are they going to play? We know they're going to play 3-4-3. So it's like he's just showing his hand all the time. So listen, I like the guy's got charisma, but in terms of coaching record, he's just not working at Man United.
Well, obviously, we could spend all day talking about Ruben Amorim and Man United. I'm sure we will do on different episodes of this podcast, but that's all we've got time for this week. Join us again next week for more Football Reporters.